Now I'm going to demonstrate how to use the RNA cycle constraint in XRNA.js. This one's a pretty fun one. In this, I'm going to need you to conceptualize of a graph, as in graph theory, and that means that every single nucleotide in this scene is a node, and every base pair that exists between nucleotides is an edge. Also, any adjacent nucleotide with adjacent indices are also, there's an edge between those two nodes. So this nucleotide 1416 and this nucleotide 1417 are connected by an edge in the graph, as is 1418 and 1417, and 1418 is also connected to 1613. So it goes on like that, and the RNA cycle is defined as the smallest cycle in that graph, which loops out of a free nucleotide, so a non-base paired nucleotide, and ends at that same nucleotide. So if anytime you want to use the RNA cycle constraint, if you're right-clicking, you must right-click on a single that is non-base paired nucleotide. And if you're middle mouse dragging, it's a bit more complicated most of the time. Okay, so I'm just going to demonstrate. So you probably want to select, say, this portion here, and you want to try to capture there. So in order for the RNA cycle constraint to be able to pick this up, you can see it failed, but in order for it to pick it up, it has to determine that every single nucleotide center that you clicked and dragged over is reachable from, yeah, from some other nucleotide that was part of it. So if they're disconnected in any way, it's going to fail. So just be a bit careful when you're middle mouse clicking in order to select a cycle. It can be a bit difficult. Okay, so this menu is much more simplified, so you can't linearly click and drag, or you can't linearly transform the whole RNA cycle. I mean, technically you could, but you may as well do that with a subdomain constraint. And so instead of doing that, you can click and drag, as always, but it redefines this cycle. So the cycle is repositioned as a circle, and so the radius of that circle is changed in order to meet both this radius constraint as well as your click and drag definition of the circle. And it's anchored, as always, by the smallest nucleotide indices involved in that cycle. So we have 1615 as the largest and 1360 as the smallest. And everything else that branches off of the RNA cycle is transformed as well, but they're sort of secondary. So they're not annotated under the annotate menu. If you annotate with the RNA cycle constraint, it will only annotate these nucleotides that actually define that constraint. Also note that for the time being, the format tab is not supported under the RNA cycle constraint. So moving on to the annotation constraint, we can right-click on a single nucleotide, and if we wanted to, we could make every single nucleotide that is part of the cycle annotated just to show you what happens. And just like that, you can see that an annotation is created for each of these, whether they're base paired or not. And so this has been the RNA cycle constraint under XRNA.js.